In the quiet corners of childhood memory, there exists a place that feels more real than reality itself. A place where honey flows like golden rivers and friendship conquers every storm. The 100 Acre Wood has been our sanctuary for nearly a century, a realm where a bear of very little brain teaches us the profound wisdom of simplicity, where loyalty is measured not in grand gestures, but in the willingness to share your last pot of honey with a friend in need. But what if I told you that beneath the surface of this beloved children's paradise lies something far more complex and troubling than anyone ever imagined? What if the characters we grew up loving, the friends who shaped our understanding of companionship and wonder, were never meant to be the innocent figures we believed them to be? This is not the story of how a teddy bear came to life in the imagination of a child. This is the story of how a group of brilliant researchers looked deeper into the 100 Acre Wood and discovered something that would forever change how we see these timeless characters, something that reveals a hidden truth about the nature of the human mind itself. On a December day in the year 2000, more than 70 years after Christopher Robin first ventured into that magical wood, the Canadian Medical Association Journal published a study that would send shockwaves through the world of children's literature. The paper was titled Pathology in the 100 Acre Wood, a neurodevelopmental perspective on A. Milne. Its authors were not literary critics or children's book enthusiasts. They were medical professionals, neurodevelopmentalists who had spent their careers studying the intricate workings of the human brain and the disorders that can shape our behaviour, our thoughts, and our very perception of the world around us. Dr. Sarah Shea and her colleagues had made a startling discovery. They argued that each beloved resident of the 100 Acre Wood was not simply a charming character with endearing quirks, but rather a representation of serious psychological disorders. Characters that millions of children had embraced as friends were, in their professional opinion, what they termed seriously troubled individuals, many of whom meet criteria for significant disorders. The implications of this revelation are staggering. Consider for a moment the bear who taught us about friendship and the simple joys of life. According to these researchers, Winnie the Pooh displays clear signs of an eating disorder, his constant obsession with honey representing something far more concerning than innocent gluttony. His repetitive behaviours, his inability to focus on anything beyond his next meal, his compulsive counting, all point to a mind trapped in patterns that go far beyond charming absent-mindedness. But Pooh is not alone in this reinterpretation. The anxious Piglet, with his constant worry and his trembling voice, suddenly becomes a textbook case of generalized anxiety disorder. The perpetually gloomy Eeyore, whose melancholy we once found endearing, emerges as a profound example of clinical depression. Even the exuberant Tigger, whose boundless energy brought such joy to our childhood readings, reveals himself as a clear manifestation of hyperactivity disorder. This was not merely an academic exercise. Dr. Shea and her team had a purpose that went far beyond literary analysis. They wanted to remind the world that mental health disorders can affect anyone, that behind every behaviour we might dismiss as merely quirky or charming, there could be a deeper struggle taking place. Their study was designed to open our eyes to the reality that mental illness does not discriminate, that it can touch even the most beloved figures in our collective imagination. The question that haunts us now is whether A. Milne, writing in 1926, somehow intuited these psychological complexities in his characters, or whether we are simply seeing patterns that were never intended to be there. The truth is far more fascinating and complex than a simple yes or no answer. When A. Milne sat down to create his stories in the 1920s, the field of psychology was in its infancy. The very concept of learning disabilities would not be formally introduced until 1963, 7 years after Milne's death. The diagnostic manual that these researchers used to analyse his characters did not exist when he penned those first tales of the 100 Acre Wood. Yet there is something undeniably prescient about the way Milne crafted each personality. Take Christopher Robin's beloved teddy bear, received on his first birthday in 1921. This simple alpha Farnell bear, originally named Edward, would become the inspiration for a character whose behaviours seem to anticipate decades of psychiatric research. The real Winnipeg, a Canadian black bear at London Zoo, provided the name, but the psychological complexity appears to have emerged from somewhere far deeper in Milne's creative consciousness. The researchers discovered patterns that are impossible to ignore. Pooh's obsessive relationship with honey extends far beyond normal appetite. His perseveration, his inability to think about anything else when food is on his mind, his ritualistic counting behaviours all align perfectly with what we now recognise as obsessive-compulsive disorder. The study even speculates about more complex diagnoses, wondering if Pooh might eventually present with Tourette's syndrome, given his coexisting attention disorders and compulsive behaviours. But perhaps the most striking example is Eeyore, the melancholic donkey whose persistent gloom has entertained generations of children. The researchers identified him as suffering from dysthymia, a form of chronic depression that may have been triggered by the trauma of his repeated tail amputations. What we once saw as harmless comic relief, they argue, is actually a manifestation of deep psychological distress. His inability to feel joy, his persistent negativity, his emotional flatness, all point to a character trapped in the grip of clinical depression. This reinterpretation forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the stories that shaped our childhood. Were we laughing at characters who were actually struggling with serious mental health conditions? Were their quirks and foibles actually cries for help that we never recognized? The researchers suggest that Eeyore's famous pessimistic statements and general malaise, which provided gentle humor in the original stories, are actually symptoms of a serious mood disorder when viewed through this psychiatric lens. The implications extend beyond mere literary analysis. If these beloved characters do indeed represent various mental health conditions, then millions of children have been unconsciously learning to recognize and empathize with psychological struggles they might not otherwise understand. The theory transforms the 100 Acre Wood from a simple playground of imagination into a comprehensive guide to the human psyche, a place where complex mental health concepts are made accessible through the gentle medium of children's literature. Dr. Shea and her colleagues were not content to simply diagnose these characters. They took their analysis one step further, speculating about potential treatments. They wondered how much richer Pooh's life might be if he were given a trial of low-dose stimulant medication, suggesting that with proper treatment he might become fitter, more functional, and perhaps even produce more poetry. And so we return to the gentle slopes of the 100 Acre Wood, but now we see it through different eyes. What began as a satirical academic study has evolved into something far more profound, a lens through which we can examine not just beloved characters, but our own understanding of mental health itself. The truth is that whether A. A. Milne intended these psychological depths, or whether we have projected them onto his innocent creations, may be less important than what they have taught us. In a world where mental health struggles are often hidden behind smiles and silence, these characters have become unlikely ambassadors for understanding and acceptance. Perhaps the real magic of the 100 Acre Wood was never in its ability to transport us away from reality, but in its power to help us understand reality more deeply. Through Pooh's obsessions, Piglet's anxieties, Eeyore's depression, and Tigger's hyperactivity, generations of readers have learned that different minds work in different ways, and that there is no shame in struggling with the invisible battles that rage within us all. The researchers who first opened this door did so with a simple but powerful message. Anyone can suffer from mental health challenges, and there is profound strength in seeking help. In the end, the 100 Acre Wood remains what it has always been, a place of friendship, understanding, and unconditional acceptance, a sanctuary where even the most troubled among us can find their place in the world.